Isn't it so cool how certain animations physically take over your character in games? Like, you did a command and it just took control, making it feel like the character knew how to move all along, but it just lets you drive it most of the time. That's root motion. Here's how it works. It takes the movement baked into the root bone of an animation and applies it to the game world.
What?
What this basically means is, say you input a jump attack, the character enters the jump attack animation, and while that's playing, you're getting all of the visual stuff, like the anticipation, the wind up, whatever the stuff is called. What actually matters for us is how much the root bone itself moves over the course of that sequence. If you watch it play out, you can see how far it ends up from where it started. That's the motion we want. The goal is to pull that out of the animation space and use it to physically move the character along the same path in the game world. Unreal Engine does a great job at handling this stuff already. The character class and the character moving component pull the motion directly out of the animation and apply it. But we are not using either of those. We are instead building our own moving component from scratch, which means that none of that root motion machinery exists in our code yet, which also means we have to do it ourselves. So, in order to make that possible, we need to start by caching a few things: the skeletal mesh, the movement to apply, the rotation, and whether or not root motion is even valid this frame. Getting this information is simpler than you might think. All we've got to do is just figure out how to actually process it in our movement component. Caching the skeletal mesh reference is the easiest thing we can take care of right now. This is mandatory because where else are we going to pull the root motion from? Just before the movement state logic, we call our own internal consume root motion method. The process in the method is pretty straightforward. Clear any of the root motion information that we might have already stored, and then bail early if either the skeletal mesh, anim instance, or the montage is invalid. It goes and calls consume root motion on the cached skeletal mesh component that returns a struct containing all of the root motion movement information. If the struct says that we have root motion, we can call convert local root motion to world. Remember, the animation is authored in the mesh's local space, so this converts it into world space that we can actually extract the translation and the rotation from, which we are free to cache and then set our own has root motion flag to true. At this point, we can apply the cached rotation and go ahead and start applying the root motion translation delta. Since this is in the grounded movement, we don't need to touch or apply the z-axis at all, and the rest of grounded movement update takes care of keeping us on the ground properly. Whenever we are going to apply root motion delta to our movement, we have to make sure we divide it by delta time. Delta time is just how long the last frame took. Root motion gives us a distance. Dividing that distance by the time it took gives us distance over time, which is just speed. In the airborne movement update, we match the same division formula idea, but we keep the z-axis from the root motion, which keeps any verticality provided by the montages. This is another one of those places where we let parts of velocity get set directly. That's what you want with root motion. The animation's driving, so it has full authority over velocity. But sometimes you don't want the animation to decide absolutely everything. What if you just want to launch the character and also stay in control? Now, there's honestly multiple ways to do this, but the overarching idea is to add a velocity to your velocity. That's why we have apply instant acceleration. It's basically a watered down version of launch character, just without the ability to override lateral and or vertical velocity. Now we can build a cool launch pad. I'm sure you can do this much better than I can, but the point still stands. You can do all kinds of things like knockback, dashes, and wall jumps. But just remember, it's not necessarily ideal for granular or specific movements. That's what root motion's for. Our 2 new additions to the custom movement component are ready to go. And with that, bye-bye!